Ectasia means stretching or thinning. So it's a non-inflammatory, bilateral, ectatic condition of the cornea, and it occurs in its axial part. Axial part is the center part of the cornea. It's a progressive disorder. That is, once the changes of keratoconus sets in, deterioration occurs. The cornea assumes a conical shape. The name itself, that is keratoconus, indicates that it is a conical shape of the cornea. Normal shape of the cornea is elliptical, but here the cornea assumes a conical shape. This occurs due to the thinning of the stroma and protrusion of the corneal layers. The onset will occur, it starts during the age around puberty and progresses slowly. During this time, probably the hormonal changes are supposed to play a role in the progression of keratoconus. Associations. It is associated with few conditions. You can see that the cornea has 5 layers, that is epithelium, Bowman's membrane, stroma, Descemet's membrane, and endothelium. So there are few associations. It is commonly seen with few systemic conditions wherein there is a problem with collagen synthesis or certain ocular conditions. Systemic conditions like Down syndrome, Marfan syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, these are the common systemic associations. Ocular associations are like retinitis pigmentosa, and secondary to any trauma or spring catarrh, that is your VKC, which also occurs in the pubertal age group. The main pathology here is defective synthesis of mucopolysaccharides. Mucopolysaccharides and collagen tissue, the synthesis is disturbed, because of which there will be stretching of the corneal layers. So presentation is usually after puberty. The patient comes to you with a unilateral defective vision. Though it is bilateral, one eye is affected more than the other eye. So there is a defective vision. The main cause of defective vision is, in the earlier stages, it is myopia. Because of stretching, the cornea stretches forward. So there is an increase in the overall axial length of the eye. That is, there is a myopia. And because of irregular distortion of the cornea, there is an irregular type of astigmatism. So this irregular type of astigmatism is the main cause of defective vision. And this does not improve with glasses. The patient comes to you with persistent need of change of glasses. And the patient is not satisfied with frequent change in glasses. And if the patient is a contact lens wearer, because of the conical shape of the cornea, there is a decreased tolerance to the contact lens wear. Here I am showing you a picture, slit lamp photography of keratoconus. This is the cornea, this is the iris. When you project the light over the cornea, what you are seeing is the shape of the cornea has become conical. Instead of the elliptical shape, it assumes a conical shape. So there is a paracentral. This thinning is not in the peripheries, but in the center of the cornea, or a little lower to the center of the cornea. So it is called as paracentral stromal thinning with apical protrusion. Next is the slit lamp examination will show many features in a case of keratoconus. One is Brooks line. Due to the stretching, what happens is there are few folds or lines which are seen in the cornea. These are vertical lines. Brooks lines are vertical lines. These are due to folds in the Descemet's membrane and in the deep stromal striae. So you can see them as lines. When you are pressing the cornea with your finger, what happens is these lines, which are the stretch marks, will disappear. This is one of the characteristic features of keratoconus. Then you can see a Fleischer's ring. Wherever the cone is there, that is around the cone, you can see at the base of the cone a deposition of iron ring. So that iron deposition in a circular pattern at the base of the cone is called as Fleischer's ring. Window reflex is distorted. Normally, if a person stands in front of the cornea, in front of the window, the reflection of the window falls on the cornea. And you can see those as regular pattern of the window. If the window has, supposing square grills, that you can see on the cornea. But in case of keratoconus, due to altered corneal reflex, the window reflex is distorted. Placido disc is one instrument which we use in our OPD. In this, it has Myers of black and white circles continuously. These are projected onto the cornea of the patient. Normal cornea will show regular white and black circles, whereas irregularity in the shape of circles is seen in case of keratoconus. Keratometry is an instrument which is used for measuring the corneal curvature. It gives you the measurement in horizontal and vertical direction. So in keratometry, there is a difficulty in aligning the horizontal and vertical Myers. Normal keratometry reading will be around 42 to 46 diopters. In case of keratoconus, the keratometry readings are increased because there is an increase in curvature. About 47, anything above 47 will be seen in keratoconus. Again, depending on keratometry readings, it can be graded as if it is around 47, it is mild keratoconus. Somewhere around 49 to 50 is moderate, and more than 50 to 53 is severe keratoconus. Direct ophthalmoscopy. As you all know, ophthalmoscopy is an instrument to see the posterior segment or the fundus examination. So before seeing the posterior segment, we just do a distant direct ophthalmoscopy, holding the ophthalmoscope at a distance of 30 centimeter from the eye. When you see through the distant direct ophthalmoscopy, you see as if there is an oil droplet reflex. This is one feature of keratoconus. I'll show you in a photograph. Retinoscopy is going to show you a scissoring type of reflex. This is an oil droplet reflex. Here you can see in the center of the cornea there is as if there is a drop of oil that is there. This is called as oil droplet reflex. One clinical sign that we can see in a patient of keratoconus is localized bulging of the lower lid. When you ask the patient to look down, you can see a V-shaped pattern is formed here. This V-shaped pattern is due to the conical shape in this part of the cornea. This is called as Munson sign. This is one of the clinical features of keratoconus. This is one photograph of corneal topography. In the topography, you can see in the center of the cornea, the red spots indicate high or increased curvature, whereas the blue zones indicate a flattened curvature. So in the center of the cornea, here and here, you can see the curvature is increased. This is a case of keratoconus. Now, complications. What can happen if you leave the case of keratoconus as it is? Due to a lot of stress on the corneal collagen fibers, the Descemet's membrane will rupture. If the Descemet's membrane ruptures, then it is called as acute hydrops. What will happen here is because of Descemet's membrane rupture, the endothelial support is also disturbed. So the aqueous from the AC will enter into the corneal layers and lead to stromal edema. So whenever there is stromal edema, the patient will present to you with defective vision, pain, photophobia, and lacrimation. At the end, in a case of acute hydrops, you can see this corneal edema. But as the hydrops is healing, it will lead to a scar formation. This is the initial stage wherein there is edema. This is a corneal edema. Here, when after the healing of the corneal edema, you can see the cornea has formed scars. This is corneal scarring. The problem is once the corneal scar appears, it becomes permanent. So you have to treat a patient of keratoconus before the hydrops develops. That is why we need an early diagnosis in case of keratoconus. Coming to the treatment part, how do you treat it? First, in the initial stages, when the patient only has myopia, then you give the patient spectacles. But if the patient is not satisfied with spectacles, that is, the glasses are not able to control the astigmatism, then you can try the patient with contact lenses. But here, the soft contact lenses are not going to stay in the cornea. You have to use rigid contact lenses. Rigid are thick, hard contact lenses that are worn that will also control the shape of the cornea. The procedure, surgical procedure, therapeutic procedure, which you can do in a case of keratoconus is called as corneal collagen cross-linking or C3R. Collagen cross-linking means the fibers of collagen are cross-linked using UV light. How it is done is in the first step, epithelium is removed. And in the second step, what is done is you have available drops of riboflavin. These riboflavin eye drops are instilled in the eye every 3 minutes for about half an hour. After this, the riboflavin will photosensitize the cornea. The patient is subjected to UVA radiation. UVA radiation will cause polymerization of the collagen fibrils. That is, there will be linkage of the collagen fibrils, and this leads to collagen cross-linking or the stability of the cornea. How it is important is once it stabilizes the cornea, one thing is your astigmatism is corrected, and second thing is it should be done before the development of hydrops. As you have seen in the case of hydrops, the corneal scarring develops. So once the scarring develops, we cannot go for this procedure. That is why an early diagnosis and early therapy is essential in the case of keratoconus. After the procedure is done, you apply a therapeutic band-aid soft contact lens to provide support to the cornea. there are new advanced procedures which are done in a case of keratoconus. One of the procedures is intracorneal ring segment implantation. There are few rings that are manufactured which can be placed within the corneal layers to provide stability to the cornea. This, you can see here, the cornea of a patient. In this, you can see a transparent small ring-like structure. This ring-like structure is the intracorneal ring which is applied in the cornea. Here you can see the ring-like structure. So this is seen in case of cornea, intracorneal ring. After finishing with keratoconus, one mention about the condition called as keratoglobus. Here, instead of the central or apical part of the cornea, the entire cornea is having a change in the surface along with the globe. So there is a hemispherical protrusion of the whole cornea, not only the central part of the cornea, but the entire part of the cornea, and the whole of cornea is involved. This is called as keratoglobus. This condition is present at birth. A differential diagnosis is Booth-Thalmos. Booth-Thalmos is nothing like, it is the congenital glaucoma case. In case of congenital glaucoma, due to increased intraocular pressure, the cornea becomes enlarged in size. You see megalocornea there. It is called as Booth-Thalmos. It is bull-like eyes. But the differentiating features are here in a case of keratoglobus, the IOP is normal, angle of the AC is normal. In the case of glaucoma, where you see cupping changes in the optic disc, here there are no changes in the optic disc. That is a differentiating feature. A few corneal degenerations we'll discuss. Arcus senilis. Arcus senilis is a ring-like deposition which you see in the peripheral cornea. This comes with age. Senilis means age. So as the patient ages, there is an arc-like deposition in the periphery forming a corneal opacity. This is mainly filled with lipid infiltration of the cornea, normally seen around more than 60 years of age. It is a one in a broad concentric ray line. Mostly it is thicker superiorly and inferiorly. If it occurs at a younger age group, that is less than 40 years, then you call it as arcus juvenilis. Because this is a lipid infiltration, if you are seeing it in a younger patient, then you have to check for the lipid metabolism of the patient. Arcus senilis is seen band-shaped keratopathy. Deposition of calcium in the Bowman's layer and the anterior part of the stroma is seen in certain conditions that you call it as band-shaped keratopathy. Causes are, there is chronic anterior uveitis, that is the cause of band-shaped keratopathy, or certain conditions like hysis bulbi, or when there is silicone oil in the AC. Silicone oil is injected into the posterior segment, that is into the vitreous cavity during retinal surgeries. If that stays for a longer time in the eye, it can come in front into the AC and cause damage to the cornea called as band-shaped keratopathy. It is also seen in cases of hypercalcemia. In the conditions of hypercalcemia, you see band-shaped keratopathy. Other degenerations are spheroidal degenerations, Salzmann nodular degenerations, and Tenney's marginal degeneration. This is one photograph which is showing small spheroidal shape degeneration in the cornea called as spheroidal degeneration. Photoophthalmia, when a patient is exposed to UV rays for a longer duration of time, that will damage the cornea. So this is normally seen after exposure to a welding arc or cinema studios. Even in case of snow, exposure of the light rays reflected from the snow, there is a condition called as snow blindness. So bright flash of short circuit can also cause this. The patient will come to you with imminent pain, lacrimation, and photophobia. Multiple erosions are seen. The main treatment here is you have to give comfort to the eyes, that is in the form of cold compresses, and you have to give lubrication for corneal healing. So TR lubricants is the mainstay of treatment. Now a word about corneal dystrophies. There are few conditions in the cornea called as corneal dystrophies. We have seen degenerations. Degenerations occur in the older age group, which are nothing but senile changes. But dystrophies are certain hereditary conditions which occur at a younger age group. It is not associated with inflammation. It is a non-inflammatory hereditary corneal disorders. These are bilateral, and the corneal opacities here are non-vascularized. In case of any inflammation, you see vascularization. But this particular condition is non-inflammatory and non-vascularized, and because it is hereditary, you can see bilaterally. It is seen in both eyes. So there are involvement of corneal dystrophy can occur at every level, at epithelium level, at Bowman, stromal, or endothelial. I'll just give you an example of each one of them. Epithelial dystrophies are seen in form of recurrent corneal erosions. You have few names in that. So lattice degeneration, all I've seen. Hogan's microcystic dystrophy is seen. Epithelial basement dystrophy or Eastman's dystrophy are seen in the epithelial layer. In the stromal dystrophy, the most common one are annular, macular, and lattice dystrophies. These are a pattern of dystrophy that is seen in the stromal layers. So endothelial dystrophies important are diffuse hereditary endothelial dystrophy. Now our next topic is eye banking and keratoplasty. We'll just discuss a few things about eye banking and keratoplasty. Eye banking. What is eye banking? Eye banking mainly means collection, storage, distribution of the donor eyes for corneal grafting. Functions of eye bank are it promotes the eye donation. It creates awareness among the people for eye donation. Once somebody is ready for eye donation, you have to do a registration of the pledger. And then there is a collection of the donated eyes. Receiving and processing of the corneal tissue is done. Most important thing is preservation of the tissue. The tissue has to be preserved. There are various methods of preservation of the tissues. I'll talk to you about them. And then distribution to the corneal surgeon, and also useful for research activities. Legal aspect, any legal aspect that is the collection and use of donated eyes, it comes under the Transplantation of Human Organs Act 1994. So we'll just see a few things about this. Now, sources of donor eyes. Donors are the people we have seen who have pledged to donate the eyes. So at the time when a person pledges to donate the eye, there is a voluntary registration of the eye donors. So the donor eyes will have to be registered previously, or if the relatives agree for eye donation, then you can go for eye donation. Sometimes the unclaimed bodies which are present in the hospital, prison, accident, or mortuaries, they are also utilized for donation. There are certain contraindications that few eyes cannot be used for donation. Among these, the very important ones are listed here. One is death due to unknown cause. If the cause is not known, or if there is a sudden death without any etiology, then you cannot take such an eye. Ocular diseases. Supposing a patient is previously diagnosed to have retinoblastoma, you cannot use his cornea for grafting. Or if a patient has undergone corneal refractive surgeries. Refractive surgeries is like LASIK, who has undergone LASIK on the cornea or any other refractive surgeries, then you cannot use the cornea for donation because there will be altered corneal mechanism here. And if the patient is suffering from essential diseases like viral, if there is any CNS disease like you have SSP, subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, or PMFL, or if the patient has CMV or congenital rubella, rabies, and in patients who have HIV or AIDS, or who have high-risk behavior or exposure to people who are having high-risk behavior, you cannot take those corneas. And in the patients, if they are having leukemias and lymphosarcomas and other cancer or malignancies, then those corneas are also not selected. Now, collection. The collection is important. How it is collected? One is within 6 hours of death, the eye has to be collected. The tissue of the eye has to be collected within the 6 hours of death, because as the duration increases, the viability of the cornea decreases. It should be taken along with the consent of the patient's relatives. Whenever you are collecting the patient's cornea, you also have to take a blood sample from the body for HIV and hepatitis B screening. The collection can be done in two forms. One is enucleation, another one is scleral button. In case of enucleation, what happens is we are taking the entire eyeball along. The entire eyeball is removed from the orbit or from the socket by cutting the optic nerve. And from this, later on, we'll harvest the cornea. We get the entire eyeball to the eye bank. From there, we can harvest the cornea. Or what you can do is, at the patient side, you can take the scleral button. That is, you can just cut around the cornea in a 360 degrees manner from at a 1 mm distance from the cornea, and take a scleral button. Once you have collected this, you have to transfer it to a wide mouth bottle with always the cornea facing upwards on moistened cotton roll. So it is a 4 degrees centigrade. The maintenance of the cornea is done at 4 degrees centigrade. Evaluation. There are certain corneas that are not suitable. These are not suitable corneas. The ones which we need to avoid are when the endothelial cell count is very low. The normal endothelial cell count is about 3,200 to 3,500. As the age progresses, it declines up to about 2,800. But any cornea which is having endothelial cell count less than 1,500 cells is not viable. It is not going to give good results. And if the cornea, while studying the cornea, we study it under the microscope, or you can use a specular microscopy. If the patient has extreme polymagatism is nothing but if the endothelial cell count is less, or there is a damage to endothelial cells, the cells surrounding the damaged cell will increase in size or change in shape, called as pleomorphism. If these features are there, that means the cornea is not healthy. Or if the patient's cornea has gutte, then it is not a healthy cornea, or extensive areas of corneal edema or severe capies. Preservation. Short-term preservation is done at 48. Short-term preservation can be done for about a period of 48 hours. In this, you can do it by storing the cornea at 4 degrees centigrade, and saline humidification is done. Whereas medium-term preservation, about short-term preservation can be done, that is up to 48 hours. Medium-term is for about 2 weeks, or long-term preservation can be done for years together. So for 48 hours, if you want to preserve, then you use 4 degrees centigrade temperature and saline humidification. These are the procedures. In case of medium-term preservation for 2 weeks, you have one medium called as McCarry-Kaufman medium. This is one solution that is prepared for storage of the cornea. This is very important. You call it as MK medium, that is McCarry-Kaufman medium. This contains chondroitin sulfate. It is enriched with chondroitin sulfate, and Optisol medium are also available. So these are the media for medium-term preservation. In case of long-term preservation, that is up to 35 days, organ culture method can be used. How you store the organs? In a similar way, you can store the cornea for up to 35 days. For indefinite period storage, you can do a cryopreservation wherein the tissue is stored at about -160 degrees. And this can be continued for this preservation will allow storage for an indefinite period. Now, after the storage, collection and the storage of the cornea, we'll see the procedure. What is the procedure? Keratoplasty. So, keratoplasty is nothing but replacement of the host cornea. That is the central part of the host cornea, about 7.5 to 8 mm is removed, and it is replaced with a cadaveric donor cornea. So, always it is removed from the cadaver. So, cadaveric donor cornea is used. So, this is known as keratoplasty, or in other words, corneal grafting. Now, indications for keratoplasty. These are the main indications for keratoplasty. Optical indication. Optical indication means for the purpose of vision. When you are using the corneal graft for the purpose of vision to the patient, then it is called as optical keratoplasty. Then you have something called as tectonic keratoplasty. Tectonic is to preserve the integrity of the cornea. Therapeutic is for the treatment. Supposing a cornea is infected, then if the infection is not being able to control, then you have to remove that part of the cornea for therapeutic purpose. Then that is called as therapeutic keratoplasty. The last and very least used indication is cosmetic. Supposing a young patient doesn't want a corneal scar, though he is having a retinal problem or any other pathology which will not give vision to the patient, but an unsightly scar is the reason, then it is called as cosmetic. We'll just see each one of them. Optical keratoplasty. In case of optical keratoplasty, you use it to improve the visual acuity. So, you replace an opaque or distorted host tissue by a clear and healthy donor tissue. What are the conditions wherein we are using this type of keratoplasty? The most common one we have discussed here, keratoconus. Keratoconus is a condition, as we have discussed, because of the change in the shape of the cornea, or whenever the cornea is becoming conical in shape and it is leading to irregular astigmatism, then that is an indication for optical keratoplasty. Any scarring could be due to any trauma or any other eye disease, that is also an indication for keratoplasty. You have certain conditions like keratopathy in case of pseudophakic or aphakic patients, because of the constant irritation. If it is an AC IOL, in the anterior chamber the IOL is placed, it will continuously cause irritation to the cornea and cause bullous keratopathy. So in such cases also you can go for optical keratoplasty. This is one photograph. This is showing a patient had a corneal dystrophy. In a dystrophy patient, you can see how his cornea is opaque. So what you are doing in keratoplasty is you are removing 7.5 to 8 mm of the cornea, and that is being replaced by the donor cornea. So here you can see the patient now has a central clear cornea that is sufficient for vision. This is called as optical keratoplasty. Tectonic or reconstructive. The main purpose of tectonic keratoplasty is to preserve the corneal anatomy. That is, if the patient is having a problem with the corneal layers, like if there is a chance that the patient is cornea is going to perforate, or the integrity of the patient is is about to undergo stromal thinning, or to reconstruct the anatomy of the eye after any procedure, then you go for tectonic or reconstructive keratoplasty. Here in this patient's cornea in this part had a decimetoscale which was about to perforate. So to prevent the perforation of this part of the cornea, you have replaced only this part of the cornea with a patch graft. This type of patch grafting is called as tectonic keratoplasty. So this is only for reconstructive purpose. Next, therapeutic keratoplasty. Therapeutic is to remove the inflamed corneal tissue which has infected corneal tissue which is not responding to antibiotics. So, supposing in a case of corneal ulcer, which is long-standing corneal ulcer, which is having, the patient is having bacterial infection or a fungal infection or a viral infection which is not responding to the respective treatment, then you go for a keratoplasty called as therapeutic keratoplasty. Or as I suggested, cosmetic is to improve the patient's appearance due to an unsightly corneal scar, even though the patient is not having any visual prognosis or good vision after the surgery. Then that type of indication is called as cosmetic. Here you can see this patient had a corneal ulcer. This corneal ulcer patient was treated, and you can see the sutures of keratoplasty in the central part of the cornea. So this much part of the cornea was operated. Whenever we are operating, we leave a rim of about 3 mm to 3.5 mm of the patient's original cornea. So now coming to the types of keratoplasty, there are different types of keratoplasty. One is penetrating keratoplasty, another one is lamellar. These are the different types of lamellar keratoplasty. I'll tell you the meaning of penetrating keratoplasty. Penetrating means all the layers, that is epithelium, Bowman's, stroma, Descemet's membrane, endothelium. The entire cornea of the patient is removed and then replaced with a donor cornea. Lamellar keratoplasty. Lamellar means only a part of the cornea. Part in the sense, out of the 5 layers, either the first 3 layers are removed or the last 2 layers are removed. That is, it can be an anterior or a posterior keratoplasty. Only few layers of the cornea are removed and it is called as lamellar keratoplasty. Here we have DALK is lamellar keratoplasty, which is deep anterior. Deep anterior means you are removing the anterior surfaces, that is the epithelium, Bowman's membrane, and anterior part of the stroma. Whereas the posterior part of the stroma, Descemet's and endothelium is intact. So this type of keratoplasty is called as lamellar keratoplasty. This is deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty. This is done from the anterior side. That is only the anterior layers are removed. Then you have another type called as DSEK. Here it is Descemet stripping endothelial keratoplasty. Here in this, what you are doing is you are removing the Descemet's membrane and the endothelium of the cornea, but the anterior layers, that is the epithelium, Bowman's, and stroma, all of these are intact. So this is done from the posterior side. How it is done is the approach here is from the anterior chamber. You enter the anterior chamber using a incision of about 3.5 mm, and from this side you remove the patient's Descemet membrane and endothelium and replace it with the host Descemet membrane and endothelium. So this is a basic picture showing you keratoplasty, the replacement of the central part of the cornea, and at the later stage here you can see the host and the donor interface of the cornea. Now the procedure, we'll just see the steps of the procedure, how it is done. Firstly, the cadaveric donor cornea is retrieved. As we have discussed how the donor cornea is retrieved, first you can get the patient's entire eye bone in the form of enucleation, or you can get a corneoscleral button from the donor. So once that is recovered, the first thing when we go for eye donation, when we were in Sarojini, so when you are getting an eye donation call, you go and you collect the patients. We do not do an enucleation there. We used to do a corneoscleral button removal. So as soon as you remove the corneoscleral button, you have the MK medium. As I told you, this is McCarry-Kaufman medium. In this, the storage can be done for a medium period of time. So that is done for more than 48 hours. So the cornea from the donor is retrieved within the first 6 hours of death. And once you have retrieved the cornea, the cadaveric cornea is transported in a medium that is called as MK medium, that is McCarry-Kaufman's medium. So once the McCarry-Kaufman medium, you are getting the donor cornea, it is evaluated. So how do you evaluate it? Is you look for it under microscope. What all things you have to evaluate is you have to check for the layers of the cornea, and most important is checking for the endothelium of the cornea. If the endothelium is having a lower cell count, as we have discussed, that is anything less than 1500 squares per millimeter square, cells per millimeter square is not suitable for transplantation. So those corneas are not suitable for transplantation. They can be used for research purpose, but not for optical indication of keratoplasty. So the donor cornea is evaluated. Along with that, you have to evaluate the blood samples of the patient also. Like the blood samples is checking for viral infections like HIV, HBsAg. These infections in the cornea in the patient's blood sample have to be checked. After these things are evaluated, then the donor cornea is looked for their suitability. How do you go about with the procedure on the patient? First, the patient is given local anesthesia. As you're all aware, peribulbar form of anesthesia is the most commonly used type of anesthesia. Here the host cornea is removed, and it is, once the anesthesia is given, then you can go with the procedure wherein the host cornea is removed and replaced with the donor cornea. At the junction of the host and the donor, sutures are applied at the junction. We'll see the photographs here. This instrument is called as trephine. Trephine is the instrument which is used. It's a ring-like instrument, metallic instrument. So with pressure applying on the cornea, this is the patient's cornea. We are talking about the patient's cornea here. What is going to happen is with the trephine applied over the cornea, a small groove is created in the cornea. So you can see a pressure point is created in the cornea here. And then this at the pressure point, you use your side port or your blade to give a nick into the cornea. So once you are able to enter into the AC, once you have entered the AC, all around 360 degrees, you can see here dissection of the host cornea is done. So once you have done trephination, you have entered the AC. Once you have entered the AC, then 360 degrees, you are going to do the removal of the host cornea. So here you can see the entire host cornea is removed. Once the host cornea is removed, you have to fill the AC, this part of the eye, with viscoelastic substance. Basic purpose of filling here the elastic substances to form an AC. When you are putting the graft, it should not be flat. So this will act as a medium. So once you have injected the viscoelastic substance, at the end you can see there are small sutures here. Sutures are applied at the host and graft junction. So the sutures are applied. So the basic purpose of the surgery is remove the corneal button, replace it with a graft, and then sutures. These sutures can be in the form of interrupted sutures. That is, multiple sutures. All sutures should be radial in their direction, and there can be multiple sutures. Or you can give running sutures, that is continuous sutures. The main advantage of having interrupted suture is, supposing one particular suture is infected, then you can remove that part of the suture. You need not remove the entire continuous sutures. So this is the advantage of applying interrupted sutures. Now, post-op medication. For the post-op medication, the patient has to be started in an antibiotic and steroid combination. You can go for topical antibiotics and steroids. You also have to give an oral steroid in the early post-operative period, and tear lubricants are essential. For the corneal healing to take place, the tear lubricants, that is non-preservative tear lubricants, are given. Anti-glaucoma medication should be given. The pressure of the eyeball cannot be measured by applanation tonometry here in this case, because you cannot apply pressure over the cornea. So non-applanatory measures of IOP measurement are done, and then the patient can be started on anti-glaucoma medication. Steroids is compulsory. It has to be used in reducing frequency. That is, tapering of the steroid should be done, and it should be continued for almost a period of 1 year. Now the complications. What all complications are seen? Now, as you have seen in this particular picture, we have injected the viscoelastic before placing the donor cornea. But if the AC is not formed correctly at this stage, then you will see that in the end, the patient will have a very shallow AC. The problem with shallow AC is the patient's intraocular pressure increases. There will be formation of peripheral anterior synechiae. The ideal size for corneal transplant is 7.5 mm. That is the ideal size. If the graft size should be 7.5 mm. If you are using a larger graft, also you see this complication. That is a larger graft more than 7.5 mm. That is 8 to 8.5 mm. If you are using, then that will cause more of peripheral anterior synechiae formation, leading to a shallow AC. In case if you are using a smaller graft, that is less than 7.5 mm, you have to stretch the graft to put the sutures. So that much of stretching will cause astigmatism. So those are the problems in case of graft size. So as we discussed, the graft infection can occur. Infection of the graft can occur of the individual sutures itself, or the entire graft can get infected. If the endothelium is not viable, then the patient will end up with the edema of the graft. And you can see uveitis, and uveitis could be the cause of secondary glaucoma in certain patients. So you have to prevent the development of these features. There are two important things which you should know. One is graft failure and one is graft rejection. These two are two different entities. Graft failure means the graft was not taken up. Why the graft did not work? The most common reason for the graft to fail or not work is when the endothelial cell count of the graft is not good. Or during the surgical procedure, there is a trauma to the cornea graft. That is the donor. Whenever there is a donor problem, then there will be a graft failure. Either the endothelial cell count is not good or the quality of the cornea is not good. Then you have another condition called as graft rejection. What is rejection? Rejection is a hypersensitivity reaction. It is an antigen-antibody reaction. Normally, the cornea is privileged that it does not have any vessels and it does not have much of lymphocytes. But if there is some amount of vascularization in the or antigen presenting cells which are there in the donor cornea, if they are act as antigens, then the host which is having the peripheral blood vessels near the corneal limbus, those blood vessels will get the antibodies. So there is an antigen and antibody type of reaction. This is called as graft rejection. We will see a few things more about graft rejection. It is an immunological reaction. That is, it might take from 2 weeks to many years. It can occur as early as 2 weeks, or it can occur even after 8 to 10 years. Basically, it is an immunological reaction, that is antigen and antibody reaction. The rejection can occur at different layers, either at the epithelial layer, at the stromal layer, or endothelial layer. So when the rejection is seen at the epithelial layer, small epithelial ridges or lines are seen in the layer of epithelium. Sometimes subepithelial rejection or infiltrates are seen. These are seen in the form of small spots called as Krasner spots. I'll just show you a picture here so that you'll be able to understand. Here you're seeing this patient is having some amount of ciliary injection, that is circumcorneal congestion is seen here. And in the epithelium here, you can see the patient is having an epithelial line. This line of epithelium is called as epithelial ridge, that can be seen in the case of graft rejection. Now, if the subepithelial infiltrates are seen, they are seen in the form of round dots called as Krashmer spots. Then stromal rejection can also be seen as diffuse haze in the stroma, and sometimes endothelial rejection is seen. Endothelial rejection will basically come in the form of KPs, that is keratic precipitates, which are arranged in the form of a line called as Coriolis lines. So this is the picture wherein you can see multiple round dots or spots which are called as Krashmer spots. These are subepithelial infiltrates seen in a case of these all dots are Krashmer spots. Now, in case of endothelial rejection, you see multiple KPs here. These brown dots here are the KPs that you can see. So these are arranged in the form of a line called as Coriolis line. Thank you. We'll end the class here.